Mr. Chen, are you seriously walking away from $1 billion right now?
The question echoed through the glass-walled conference room on the 47th floor of Shanghai Financial Center. 22 executives sat frozen around a mahogany table the size of a small car. The air smelt like expensive cologne and desperation. Chen Wei didn't even turn around. His custom suit probably cost more than the assistant's monthly salary. His shoes clicked against the marble floor with the rhythm of someone who had never been told no in his entire life. He paused at the door, just long enough to let the silence hurt. "One parking spot," he said quietly. "That is what this cost you." The door closed behind him. The deal died right there. What no one in that room knew yet was that a 62-year-old janitor named Mateo Reyes was mopping the hallway outside. He heard everything through the gap under the door. He leaned on his mop handle and closed his eyes for a long moment. Mateo had been invisible in that building for 11 years. He cleaned the executive washrooms. He emptied Chen Wei's personal trash can every night at 9 p.m. He had seen the man maybe 400 times, and not once had Chen Wei looked at his face. But Mateo had a secret, one that would turn this billion-dollar disaster into something no one saw coming. Before we get there, you need to understand what happened, and you need to stay until the end because the photograph that saved everything was sitting in Mateo's locker the entire time. Hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and comment from which country you are watching today. Mateo Reyes woke up at 4:15 a.m. every morning for 11 years. His apartment was a 300-square-foot studio in Flushing, Queens. The radiator knocked like someone trying to break in. The floor creaked in 3 specific spots that he could navigate in complete darkness. He made coffee in a stained Mr. Coffee machine that he had owned since his wife was still alive. 2 sugars, a splash of milk. He drank it standing at the kitchen counter because there was no room for a table. His uniform hung on the back of the bathroom door. Navy blue pants, a light blue polo shirt with Sterling Building Services embroidered over the left pocket. He had worn exactly 8 of these shirts over 11 years, each one washed so many times that the fabric felt like tissue paper. Mateo was 62 years old. His hands looked like cracked leather. His back hurt every morning for the first hour. He took 2 ibuprofens before he left the apartment and 2 more at lunch. He had come to America from Manila in 2009. His wife, Luz, had died of a brain aneurysm 6 months after they arrived. She was 53 years old. They had no children. Mateo never remarried. He never even dated. He just worked and went home and slept and worked again. The janitorial supervisor at Sterling Building Services was a man named Frank D'Angelo. Frank was 48, divorced, and perpetually angry about things that had nothing to do with his employees. He smoked 2 packs of Camels a day, and his voice sounded like gravel being crushed. "Reyes," Frank said every morning at 6 a.m. sharp, "you got the executive floor tonight. Chen's having some big-shot investors in. Don't screw it up." Mateo never screwed it up. He was the best janitor in the building, and Frank knew it. That was why Frank hated him. Competent people make lazy bosses look bad. The building was called Sterling Tower. It stood 37 floors above Midtown Manhattan. The ground floor lobby had a 50-foot ceiling and a chandelier that cost more than Mateo's entire life. The elevators had leather panels and played classical music. The bathrooms on the executive floor had heated floors and towels folded into swans. Mateo started his shift at 3 p.m. He emptied trash cans, he vacuumed carpets, he cleaned the break room microwave that everyone else left splattered with yesterday's lunch. He scrubbed the toilets that other people used like they had never seen a toilet before in their lives. By 7 p.m., most of the office workers had gone home. The building got quiet. The cleaning crew had the run of the place. That was when Mateo did his best work. He listened to podcasts on a pair of cheap earbuds he bought at a Duane Reade. He liked history podcasts. He liked stories about World War II.
He liked learning things he would never use, but made him feel like his brain was still alive. His co-worker on the floor was a younger man named Javier. Javier was 29. He had a wife and 2 kids in Brooklyn. He worked 2 jobs and slept 4 hours a night. Mateo and Javier never talked much, but they had an understanding. They looked out for each other. "You hear about the Chinese investor?" Javier asked one night in the supply closet. Mateo shook his head. "Big shot from Shanghai. Name is Chen Wei. He's worth like 5 billion or something. He's supposed to sign a deal with the hedge fund on 37 next week." Mateo had no idea what a hedge fund was. He just nodded and grabbed another bottle of glass cleaner. That conversation happened on a Tuesday. The deal was supposed to close the following Monday.
The trouble started on Thursday afternoon. Mateo was mopping the hallway on the 37th floor when he saw a commotion near the corner office. 3 men in suits were arguing with a woman who seemed to be an assistant of some kind. Their voices were low but urgent. Their hand gestures were sharp. Mateo kept mopping. He had learned long ago that the best way to survive in that building was to be furniture. Walls don't get yelled at. Mops don't get fired. The woman said, "Mr. Chen is very particular about his parking. He was promised spot number 7. One of the men said, "Spot 7 has been leased to the law firm on 22 for 8 years. We can't just—" "You can," the woman said, "or the deal doesn't happen." Mateo moved his mop in slow, deliberate arcs. He had seen this kind of thing before. Rich people fighting over things that poor people couldn't even imagine wanting. He pushed his cart toward the elevator and went down to the 31st floor to clean the women's restroom. He didn't think about the argument again until Friday morning. Frank D'Angelo pulled him aside in the break room. "Reyes, I need you to do something extra tonight." Mateo waited. "One of the parking spots in the executive garage, spot number 7, the building manager wants it cleaned. Not just swept, cleaned, like waxed, like you could eat off it." Mateo nodded. "I can do that." Frank lit a cigarette, even though they were standing directly under a no-smoking sign. "Some Chinese billionaire is throwing a fit about it, something about how the spot is dirty. I don't know, these people are insane." That night, Mateo went down to the parking garage at 11 p.m. The garage was 6 levels underground. The executive level was on B2, separated from the regular parking by a rolling gate and a keycard reader. Mateo had a master keycard that worked on every door in the building. Spot number 7 was marked with a small brass plaque that said, "Reserved." The spot was clean. Not spotless, but clean. There was a small oil stain about the size of a dinner plate near the back. There was some dust in the corners. Mateo spent 2 hours on that parking spot. He used a degreaser on the oil stain. He swept, he mopped, he waxed, he buffed, he swept again. By the time he was done, the concrete looked wet even though it was completely dry. He took a photo with his phone. He didn't know why. He just felt like someone should document the work. He texted the photo to Frank with a message that said, "Spot 7 done." Frank replied with a thumbs-up emoji. No thank you, no good job, just a thumbs up. The deal was scheduled for Monday at 10 a.m.
Monday morning came in gray and cold. Mateo had the day off. He slept until 8 a.m., which felt like sleeping until noon. He made pancakes. He watched a documentary about the construction of the Panama Canal. It was a good day. At 9:47 a.m., his phone rang. It was Frank. "Reyes, get down here, now." Mateo said, "It's my day off." "I don't care. Chen is here. The deal is happening, but someone complained about the parking spot." Mateo sat up on his couch. "I cleaned it. I sent you the photo." "I know you cleaned it. That's not the problem. Someone claims the spot was dirty this morning. Chen saw it when he pulled in. He's furious. The building manager is blaming me. I'm blaming you. So get down here or you're fired." Mateo hung up and stared at the wall for 30 seconds. Then he got dressed. He took the 7 train into Manhattan. He walked 6 blocks to Sterling Tower. He went up to the 37th floor. The conference room was packed. Through the glass walls, Mateo could see 22 people sitting around a massive table. At the head of the table sat a man in a charcoal gray suit with a white pocket square folded into a perfect triangle, Chin Wei. His face was a mask of controlled disgust. Standing near the door was a man Mateo recognized as the building manager, a nervous person named Gerald, who always wore bow ties and sweated through his dress shirts before noon. Frank grabbed Mateo's arm the second he got off the elevator. "Here's what you're going to do. You're going to apologize. You're going to say you didn't clean it properly. You're going to take full responsibility. If you do that, I won't fire you." Mateo looked at Frank. Then he looked through the glass wall into the conference room. He saw Chen Wei gesturing at something on the table. He saw the hedge fund executives nodding with the desperate energy of people watching $1 billion slip through their fingers. "No," Mateo said. Frank blinked. "What did you say?" "I'm not apologizing for something I didn't do wrong. I cleaned that spot for 2 hours. I have proof." Frank's face turned red. His jaw tightened. He grabbed Mateo's elbow hard enough to leave a bruise. "Listen to me, you." The door to the conference room opened. A woman stepped out. She was tall, probably in her early 40s, wearing a black dress that cost more than Mateo's yearly rent. She had an earpiece and a tablet and the expression of someone who had never been surprised by anything in her entire professional life. "Who is this?" she asked, looking at Mateo. Frank said, "The janitor, the one who was supposed to clean the parking spot." The woman looked at Mateo like she was examining a bug. "Did you clean spot number 7 on Friday night?" Mateo stood up straight. He was tired. He was 62 years old. He had been mopping floors for 11 years in a building where no one knew his name. But he was not a liar. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "I cleaned it from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. I used degreaser on an oil stain. I waxed and buffed the concrete. I have a photograph." The woman's expression didn't change. "Show me." Mateo pulled out his phone. He opened the photo. The woman took the phone from his hand without asking. She studied the image for a long moment. Then she walked back into the conference room and closed the door behind her. Frank grabbed Mateo's arm again. "You just made everything worse." Mateo pulled his arm free. He walked to the elevator. He pressed the down button. He decided he was going home. But the elevator didn't come fast enough. Through the glass wall of the conference room, Mateo saw the woman hand his phone to Chen Wei. He saw Chen Wei look at the photograph. He saw Chen Wei's face change. The disgust faded. Something else replaced it, something Mateo couldn't read from 30 feet away. Then Chen Wei stood up. He walked to the conference room door. He opened it. He looked directly at Mateo. "Come here," Chen Wei said.
Mateo walked into the conference room. 22 people stared at him. He could feel the weight of their attention like a physical thing. His hands were shaking, but he kept them at his sides where no one could see. Chen Wei held up Mateo's phone. "This is your work?" "Yes, sir." "You cleaned this spot on Friday night?" "Yes, sir, from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. Chen Wei turned to the hedge fund executives. "Someone told me this morning that Spot 7 was dirty. Someone told me the cleaning crew had neglected their duties. I arrived at 9:30 a.m. and saw dust and a fresh oil stain." Mateo's stomach dropped. He understood what was happening. Someone had deliberately dirtied the parking spot between Friday night and Monday morning. Someone wanted this deal to fail. Chen Wei looked at Gerald, the building manager. "Who has access to the executive parking garage?" Gerald's face was the color of paste. The executives on B2, security, maintenance, cleaning crew." "Cleaning crew," Chen Wei repeated. He turned to Frank. "Your team?" Frank shook his head too quickly. "Not my team. We have protocols. We log every card swipe." Chen Wei smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "Show me." The next 30 minutes changed everything. Frank pulled up the keycard access logs on a tablet. The executive parking garage on B2 had a card reader at the entrance and another at the elevator. Every swipe was recorded with a timestamp and an employee ID number. The logs showed that Mateo's card had been used to enter B2 on Friday night at 10:58 p.m. It showed him exiting at 1:02 a.m. on Saturday. It also showed that someone had entered B2 at 7:15 a.m. on Monday morning, less than 2 hours before Chen Wei arrived. The card used belonged to a cleaning crew member named Javier Reyes. Mateo's blood left his face. Javier was his co-worker, the young father with 2 kids in Brooklyn, the man who slept 4 hours a night, the man Mateo had trusted. Javier, Mateo said quietly. He wouldn't. But the log didn't lie. Javier's card had been used, and Javier was the only other cleaning crew member assigned to the executive floor. Frank called Javier into the conference room. Javier came in looking confused. He was wearing his uniform. His shoes were scuffed. His eyes had the hollow look of a man who hadn't slept in days. Chen Wei showed him the log. "Did you enter the parking garage this morning?" Javier's face crumbled. He looked at Mateo, then he looked at the floor. Then he started talking. He talked about Frank. He talked about how Frank had called him on Sunday night and told him to go to the parking garage Monday morning and spread some dust and pour a little oil on spot 7. He talked about how Frank promised him $500 cash and an extra day off every week for a month. He talked about how Frank said the deal was going to happen anyway, and this was just a way to blame Mateo and get him fired because Frank didn't like him. Frank was already walking toward the door when Javier said his name. Security stopped Frank in the hallway. He didn't run, he didn't fight. He just stood there with his hands in his pockets and a cigarette hanging from his lips, looking for all the world like a man who had finally been caught doing something he had gotten away with 100 times before. Chen Wei looked at Gerald. "Your building manager, your security protocols, your employee." Gerald stammered something about investigating and taking action and following proper procedures. Chen Wei cut him off. "The deal is off." The room went silent. Chen Wei looked at the hedge fund executives. "You told me you ran a world-class operation. You told me your building was managed with precision and integrity. You let a parking spot destroy $1 billion because your people are petty and dishonest." The hedge fund CEO, a man named Robert Thornton, stood up. He was 60 years old, silver-haired, and had never apologized for anything in his life. "Mr. Chen, please, we can resolve this. We can—" "No," Chen Wei said, "you cannot." He picked up his briefcase. He walked to the door. He paused. He turned back and looked at Mateo. "Your name?" "Mateo Reyes. You did good work on that parking spot, better than anyone in this building deserved." Then he left.
Mateo went back to work the next day. What else was he supposed to do? He had rent to pay, he had a Mr. Coffee machine that needed filters, he had a life that cost money, and a job that barely paid enough to cover it. Frank was gone. Someone from corporate human resources came down to the cleaning crew that Frank had been terminated effective immediately. No one seemed surprised. No one seemed sad. Javier was suspended pending investigation. Mateo didn't know what would happen to him. He felt sorry for Javier, but he also felt something harder: betrayal. The kind that sits in your chest like a stone. The story made the local news, a small item on page 6 of the business section. Chinese investor pulls billion-dollar deal over parking dispute. No one mentioned Mateo. No one mentioned Frank. It was just another story about rich people being difficult. Mateo went back to mopping floors. He went back to cleaning toilets. He went back to being invisible. 3 weeks passed. Then one day, a man in a black suit showed up at the janitorial supply closet on the 31st floor. He was tall, probably in his mid-50s, with gray hair and the kind of quiet confidence that comes from never having to worry about money. "Mateo Reyes?" the man said. Mateo was on his knees, scrubbing a coffee stain out of the carpet. He looked up. "Yes?" "My name is Victor Liang.
I work for Mr. Chen Wei. He would like to meet with you." Mateo stood up slowly. His knees cracked. "Why?" Victor Liang smiled. "He wants to show you something." The meeting was set for the next day at 2 p.m. Victor gave Mateo an address in Chelsea, not an office, a gallery, an art gallery called the Liang Collection. Mateo showed up wearing his best clothes, which were still jeans and a button-down shirt he had bought at a thrift store 4 years ago. He took the subway. He walked 6 blocks. He stood outside the gallery for a full minute before he worked up the courage to go inside. The gallery was enormous. White walls, polished concrete floors, art on every surface, paintings and sculptures and photographs in frames that probably cost more than Mateo's entire apartment. Chen Wei was waiting for him in the back room. The room had a small table with 2 cups of tea. The tea was jasmine. It smelled like Mateo's mother's kitchen from a lifetime ago. "Thank you for coming," Chen Wei said. Mateo sat down across from him. "I don't understand why I'm here." Chen Wei pushed a photograph across the table. The photograph was old, faded. The corners were soft. It showed a group of people standing in front of a small building with a sign that said Manila Children's Home. "Look at the man on the left," Chen Wei said. Mateo picked up the photograph. He looked at the man on the left. The man was young, maybe 30 years old. He was wearing a simple white shirt and dark pants. He had a kind face. He looked familiar. Mateo's hands started shaking. "That's me," Chen Wei said quietly. 42 years ago." Mateo looked up. He looked at Chen Wei's face, the hard jaw, the sharp eyes, the expensive suit. He tried to see the young man in the photograph. He couldn't. "I was an orphan," Chen Wei said. "I grew up in that home in Manila. I left when I was 17. I built a company. I made money. I never went back." Mateo didn't understand. "Why are you telling me this?" Chen Wei pointed to another person in the photograph, a woman, mid-30s, dark hair pulled back, a simple dress. She was standing next to the young man who was Chen Wei. This woman worked at the orphanage. Her name was Luz Reyes. Mateo stopped breathing. "She was a volunteer," Chen Wei said. "She came every Tuesday and Thursday. She taught the children how to read. She brought them food. She held their hands when they were scared. She changed my life." Mateo's vision blurred. He blinked hard. "Luz was my wife." Chen Wei nodded slowly. "I know. I found out 3 weeks ago, after the meeting in the conference room. I saw your name on the keycard log. Reyes. Reyes. I remembered that name. I started asking questions. It took me 2 weeks to find the photograph." Mateo stared at the image of his wife. She looked so young, so full of light. She had never told him about the orphanage. She had never told him about the children. She had kept that part of her life separate, like a secret garden that only she could enter. "She never mentioned you," Mateo said. "She wouldn't have," Chen Wei said. "She wasn't the kind of person who talked about the good she did. She just did it, quietly, faithfully, for years." Mateo put the photograph down. His hands were shaking too much to hold it anymore. "I looked you up after I left the conference room," Chen Wei said. "I found out about her passing. I found out about your life. Janitorial work, 11 years, no recognition, no promotion, no thanks." Chen Wei leaned forward. His voice was soft now, almost gentle. "Mateo, I walked away from a billion-dollar deal because of a parking spot, but I came back to New York because of your wife and because of you." "What do you mean?" Chen Wei reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. He placed it on the table between them. "I bought the building," Chen Wei said. Mateo stared at him. "Not just the parking garage, the entire building. Sterling Tower, 37 floors, 300,000 square feet.
I closed the deal yesterday for a fraction of what I would have paid 3 weeks ago." He tapped the document. "The building now belongs to a holding company called Luz Holdings, named after your wife, and 51% of that holding company belongs to you, Mateo Reyes." The room spun. Mateo gripped the arms of his chair. "That's not possible. I'm a janitor. I don't have—" "You don't have to do anything," Chen Wei said. "You don't have to manage the building. You don't have to make decisions. You just have to own it. And every month, the rent from the tenants will deposit money into your bank account, enough money that you will never have to mop another floor for the rest of your life." Mateo shook his head. "I can't accept this. I didn't do anything." Chen Wei stood up. He walked to the window. The gallery looked out over the Manhattan skyline. The sun was starting to set. The buildings were turning gold. "You cleaned a parking spot," Chen Wei said. "You did it better than anyone else in that building would have done. You took a photograph because you were proud of your work. You refused to lie when your boss told you to lie. You showed up when no one else would." He turned around. "Your wife taught me that small acts of goodness matter. She taught me that the people who don't get recognized are often the ones who deserve recognition the most. I have spent 40 years building a fortune. I have never met anyone who reminded me of her, until you." Mateo sat in the chair for a long time after Chen Wei left. Victor Liang came in and gave him a business card with a lawyer's name and number. He explained the paperwork. He explained the taxes. He explained everything that Mateo would need to know. Mateo didn't hear most of it. He was looking at the photograph, at his wife's face, at the children she had loved, at the man she had helped, who had grown up to change a janitor's life forever.
6 months later, Mateo Reyes walked into Sterling Tower for the last time as an employee. He was wearing a new suit, navy blue, custom tailored. He had bought it at a store on Madison Avenue where the salespeople called him Sir and offered him sparkling water. The security guard at the front desk didn't recognize him. That was fine. Mateo didn't expect to be recognized. He had been invisible in that building for 11 years. One suit wasn't going to change that. He took the elevator to the 31st floor. He walked to the janitorial supply closet. He opened the door and looked inside. The mops were still there, the brooms, the bottles of glass cleaner, the cheap earbuds he had left in the break room. Javier was working the floor now. He had been reinstated after a 6-week suspension. Frank had been charged with attempted fraud and embezzlement. The case was still working its way through the courts. Mateo had been asked to testify. He had agreed. "Mateo," Javier said when he saw him, "you look different." "I feel different," Mateo said. They stood in the hallway for a moment. Neither of them knew what to say. The betrayal was still there, buried under the small talk. It would never fully go away. But Mateo wasn't there for Javier. He wasn't there for Frank. He wasn't there for anyone who had wronged him. He was there for the photograph. The photograph of Luz was now framed and hanging in the lobby of Sterling Tower. Chen Wei had insisted on it. A plaque beneath it read, "Luz Reyes, teacher, volunteer, kindness in motion. This building is named in her honor." The building wasn't called Sterling Tower anymore. The new sign on the front said Luz Tower in elegant gold letters. The tenants had all stayed. The lawyers had handled everything. Chen Wei had been true to his word. Mateo walked to the lobby. He stood in front of the photograph of his wife. She was smiling in the picture. It was the same smile she had worn on the day they got married. The same smile she had told him they were moving to America. The same smile she had worn when she said goodbye. He touched the frame, just lightly, just with his fingertips. "I miss you," he said quietly. A young woman walked past him. She was probably 25, wearing a business suit and carrying a coffee cup. She stopped when she saw the photograph. She read the plaque, then she looked at Mateo. "Excuse me," she said, "are you related to her?" Mateo turned. He looked at the young woman. He thought about lying.
He thought about saying no and walking away and letting the moment pass like all the other moments had passed for 11 years, but he was tired of being invisible. "She was my wife," Mateo said. The young woman's face lit up. "That's amazing! The story about this building is incredible. Everyone in the office is talking about it. The billionaire who remembered the janitor's wife."
The parking spot that changed everything. Mateo smiled. It was the first real smile he had smiled in a very long time. "The parking spot didn't change anything," he said. "The kindness did. That's what changed everything." He walked out of the building into the Manhattan sunshine. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. The building would always be there. The photograph would always be there. His wife's name would always be there. And somewhere in a penthouse apartment overlooking the city, Chen Wei was probably drinking tea and reading the financial news and thinking about a woman who had held his hand when he was a scared orphan boy in Manila. Mateo hailed a taxi. He gave the driver his new address, not the apartment in Flushing, something bigger, something with a garden, something Luz would have loved. The taxi pulled away from the curb. Mateo watched Luz Tower disappear in the rearview mirror. The building grew smaller and smaller until it was just a speck of gold in the afternoon light. He thought about the one line he would say if anyone ever asked him how a janitor ended up owning a skyscraper. Sometimes the universe is just waiting for you to do the right thing when no one is watching. If this story hit you right in the chest, hit that like button right now. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their work matters. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about regular people who win in ways no one sees coming. And comment down below, what's the smallest act of kindness that changed your life?